You're listening to the Bosshole Chronicles. All of you out there in the Bosshole Transformation Nation, this is John Brewer, your co-host. And here is Sarah Best, my co-host. Sarah, how are you?
I'm real good, John. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm awesome. Who are we talking to today? What's going on?
Well, we have, of course, another subject matter expert episode. This is a repeat guest and subject matter expert who we're excited to feature today, who is launching his book. It's called Expand the Circle, Enlightened Leadership for Our New World of Work. And it's none other than Dr. Matt Poepsel, who we refer to often as the Godfather of talent optimization. I think our guests are going to take a lot away from Matt's framework. And the message stressed today is that, you know, this is a tough time. And it's really about embracing your leadership and expanding that leadership in a tough time. And he gives us a powerful framework with which to do it. And he also gives us his history. He'll share a little bit about how he arrived, where he is, and what has motivated him to share this really important and powerful message in his book.
Let's hear from Matt. Bosshole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, the talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode. The Godfather of talent optimization, Dr. Matt Poepsel. Good to see you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so thrilled to be back. John and Sarah, thanks for having me.
What a treat.
It is a treat. It is a treat. And, we talked about this in your first episode on the Bosshole Chronicles, that your book was just about getting ready to be published, and it is. So congratulations. That is so exciting. We just want to jump right into it and talk about the book. And I think a great place to start is, as an author, its origin, how did that really come to be? And then walk us through this framework that you have. And by the way, make sure you check the show notes. We will have a link to purchasing it. And by the way, just the imagery that the cover and your story and your approach evokes is amazing. So Matt,
take us. We can, before we jump in, let's share the title of the book.
Yeah.
Expand the Circle, Enlighten Leadership for Our New World of Work. And I'll let you take it away from there, Matt.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate it. And I would say that the book has really been sort of my professional lifetime in the making. I started off my first leadership assignment in the U.S. Marine Corps. I got to learn all about, as a young person coming up in the ranks and learning all about leadership. And when I got in the civilian world, I was like, I'm ready for more of that leadership development. And they said, what are you talking about? That's not something that we have here. I realized I was kind of on my own. So the techniques that I was using that I had been taught in the service didn't translate to civilian life at all. So as I started to go through and gain experience as a manager of people and then a manager of managers, I really came to fall in love with leadership theory and learning and practice and all these great things, and studied it at the PhD level and really complemented that with coaching and all these types of things. And what motivated me to do all of that was just seeing people suffering, to be in pain. I saw so many people who are frustrated at work, and I thought, we can do better than this. We've got the psychology for it. We need to develop applications of it. And so I knew from being motivated by saying we can make our workplaces work better, that I wanted to take my skills to the next level and bring that back to my team and ultimately to other organizations as well. But when it happened to me and I started to feel that sort of, I hit a wall, this was right during the pandemic. I went through that type of experience where I was like, I have to do something different. I have to go back to the basics and figure out what happened. How, after all these years of having been a Marine and having 20 plus years of operating experience and study at the highest level, if I've hit the limit of my leadership, like what is happening? And what I didn't realize until a little bit of reflection later is that I was going through this reprioritization and really questioning, what role does work play in my life? Like, what is my calling? What is my sense of meaning? And so when I started to realize that there's this finitude that we have, you're only going to be in the working world for so long, it really took me back to the foundation of what life is all about. I don't think life and leadership, I don't think of them as separate at all. I think we create artificial barriers between the two. But in reality, if we look at leadership as a way of living, then we come to very different, we need a different set of guidebooks.
Mhm.
For me, one of those guidebooks came down to resuming my meditation practice. And what I came to discover is that there's a framework that is in the Tibetan Buddhist meditation technique. There's something called Tonglen, which is about taking in the suffering of others and giving out, peace and compassion and all these great things. And you start with yourself before you move out to like your close family, maybe to your friends, coworkers, out to a stranger. Can you extend that even further out into the far reaches of the universe?
Mhm.
And I found that was really beautiful. But as I sat there and thinking about it, I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly how I've approached my leadership. I had to learn to lead myself
Mhm.
before I could lead others, before I could lead teams of people, lead at the organization level, and finally spill my leadership out into the world. So that became the framework for the book. I don't show up as a leader differently at work than I do with my family, or if I do out in town in some interaction with a clerk somewhere. Like, why do
Right.
these all have to be looked at differently? Anytime that we start to see ourselves as leaders, which already for some people is a stretch, then it just makes everything flow so much more naturally.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't you think we've done a really good job for, better part of a century of creating those two different worlds? So, if
Definitely.
you're a manager or a supervisor, I got to be a certain way at work, and then I leave and I can be a different way. There should be, those walls should not exist. I mean, let people show up authentically and lead authentically, but that's so powerful. You're right. Those shouldn't be different worlds.
They historically have been. You're exactly right. But when I
Yeah.
look at what happened, when I took a look at the landscape and I realized that the way that we work has fundamentally changed.
Mhm.
Yes.
2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's been changing all the time. We've
Yes.
had this constant evolution and change in the way that we work. And what I found when I looked at the most advanced organizations today, there's this movement towards corporate social responsibility. We think about environment, society, and governance. We
Mhm.
think about conscious capitalism. Organizations have evolved to a point where they're now a little bit more selfless. They manage lots of stakeholders, not just the bottom line. Sometimes there's a double bottom line. They refer to it the triple bottom line.
Mhm.
So we're seeing there's this evolution of the work that we do. From the worker's perspective, same evolution. So we used to work in order to put food on the table. Well, now that's not the issue so much. Now we want belonging. Now we
Mhm.
want to feel like we're part of something meaningful. We want to give back in some way. So we've evolved too. My question to you both is, how has leadership evolved?
Mhm.
What are we doing differently? Everything has changed. How has our leadership changed?
It hasn't.
It
It
hasn't.
hasn't.
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
So to your point you're making, John, when we have these artificial, and they absolutely are artificial walls between work and home life, the pandemic crashed that down for a lot of people. And all of a sudden, we sent our workers home to be safe, and then their work showed up in their home life, and their home showed up in their work life, and everything got muddied. And it actually was a beautiful thing. And now you're starting to see people being ripped out of their homes. It's time to
Mhm.
return to office, people.
Right.
Whoa, hold on. I was putting my kids on the bus. I was balancing my quality of life and being productive, but now you want me to come back to the office.
Right.
And it feels now like an affront, because now we've
Yes.
tasted what it can be like when we are empowered to make those decisions on our own. So I do believe in the thing I believe in the most is unity. There is a tremendous sense of connection that we often don't detect between people, between ourselves and the mission, between the leader we can be at work, but then we go home and we can take elements of that if we just try to, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's this inherent connection fundamentally that's so profound. And I think I am seeing a situation now where we absolutely are starting to tear down those walls. We just don't have the leadership techniques to accommodate that.
That's true.
Oh, wow. How does, when it comes to celebrating, expanding that connection, emphasizing or amplifying that connection, tell us how lead yourself, which is like the first circle, if you will, in the framework. Tell us how that leads to connection.
Yeah, the very first thing that I always say, and I write about it in the book, is before you can lead others, you have to learn to lead yourself. Many times we think about leadership, and again, most people, or at least too many people, are hesitant to even call themselves a leader.
Right.
If I walked into a random room in corporate America and I just said, "Hey, stand up if you're a strong leader in this organization," you think people would just jump to their feet? No way. They'd be like looking around like, "I'm not going to stand up. Are you going to stand up?" Why?
Mhm.
Why is there what mystique is there that we put on leadership? I think it's because we don't invite people to come up with their own definition of what leadership even is. There is no generally accepted definition of what leadership is. But when you start to come up with your own and you understand that, in my view, for example, it's inspiring others to contribute their energy toward a collective goal. I say inspire because I can't make you do anything, but I can inspire you to make a choice. I want you to expend your energy because that's what I'm asking you to do. And then toward a collective goal, because if you could do it by yourself, then that's not a leadership act, but you need others to all participate. That's a definition that works for me. So if that's the case, and now I understand what leadership is, absolutely, I'm a leader. I'll jump to my feet. If you say, are you a strong leader in this organization? I'd jump up and say, absolutely, I am. But then how does it begin? And that's to your point, Sarah. We've got to learn to lead yourself. So as I started to do the research and say, what does it mean in this enlightened view to lead yourself, to feel this profound connection, to feel a sense of compassion about the work that we do, and to even extend that towards yourself? And I began in a place that's not going to be a surprise at all to your audience, which is awareness. Without self-awareness, nothing can get better. And leaders will say, oh, I'm absolutely aware. Some leaders never even make it that far, unfortunately.
Right.
Well, and as someone and even referred us to, Tasha Eurich says in her amazing TEDx talk about self-awareness, her research proves that many of us think we're self-aware when few of us actually really are.
Yeah, accurate self-awareness, unbelievable. And I included her quote in the book. It's so powerful, the frameworks that she has. So that was an example when I went to say, who really gets awareness? And Tasha Eurich was absolutely there. Her book, Insight, is absolutely phenomenal. And so, when we start thinking about where does awareness come from, that's just the beginning. Leaders already at some point when I'm talking to them are like, okay, well, I think I'm kind of aware. And okay, let's move on to the next one, which is about self-acceptance.
Right.
Yes.
Oh boy, self-acceptance. Now you're like, wait a second, what does that mean? Well, when we start to look at the fact that we work so hard to try to prevent any sort of weaknesses or shortcomings to kind of seep into the outside world, we don't want to be seen as having any sort of smudges on the old resume there.
Right.
But I went through this program, an authentic leader development program at Harvard Business School, and they taught us how you go through these crucibles, and there are these challenges you have in your life when you hit rock bottom, professionally, personally. They begin to define you. And the point isn't to mask over these things, but to incorporate them and to be willing to accept them and even demonstrate, self-love and self-compassion in order to step fully into that mantle of your leadership. Now, all of a sudden, it was really hard for me, but I learned to make myself more vulnerable. I learned to be transparent about my shortcomings and even to incorporate them into my leadership. And what I found was that it didn't make people think less of me. It actually strengthened, Sarah, to your question, that connection. People are like, you're more accessible. There's a chance that, now all of a sudden you understand what I'm going through because you were willing to share the fact that didn't work out so well for you in that case. So I think that's a hard one because now you're getting into the real emotional aspects. Awareness was like, okay, yeah, I could probably, I'm aware and there's some things I see. Well, you're going to see some things you don't like. Are you willing to love yourself anyway? Are you willing to extend that kind of compassion?
Yeah. We use the EQI 2.0 assessment oftentimes when we're working with leaders and leadership teams. And I can account firsthand to the scores of leaders, managers, and supervisors who have a low self-regard. I mean, they may have higher, they may feel more confident about their abilities in things like assertiveness and stress tolerance. But at the end of the day, we kind of always land on the fact that if you aren't comfortable in your own bag of skin, if you don't know what your strengths are, and if you can't accept kind of your natural downsides, that's agonizing. And that's a place where a lot of people have to do some work.
Well, and it's depleting. It takes so much energy. I know because I was there. I am the classic imposter syndrome guy, the classic insecure overachiever. Like I got copious amounts of performance out of that approach, but I got no contentment. And it wasn't until I hit a wall all those years later that I realized I am not going to emerge as the leader that I want to be, that my people deserve me to be, to show up for them until I'm willing to have that self-worth, to have that self-regard. That is my birthright. like all of
Mhm.
us, we all
Yeah.
deserve to have that self-love, but we've conditioned it out of ourselves for a lot of different reasons. And
Yes.
it was healing that and accepting that and sitting with that allowed me to find my next level. And you're so right.
This reminds
Ah,
me of a leader with whom I worked years ago who was all about he would spout off the idea of self-evaluation. And he would say to the other leaders in the organization, you need to self-evaluate. I do a lot of self-evaluation. Well, if you're the only one speaking into your own self-evaluation, you're not going to get a clear picture. And when we really started to look more broadly at leadership development and provide feedback and constructive, in love and with respect, that did not go well. And that's not self-awareness. That's not what you're talking about. If you're a truly self-aware leader and you're doing that introspection, you're breaking it down and you're realizing, oh my gosh, I am that way. Or if not self-aware, I could destroy this person. I could say something out of hand and not even realize what I've done to this individual. And it all starts with that, but that's where that crucible is so valuable.
You're exactly right. And I think a lot of times, we talk about leadership and it's simple, but it's not easy. It is, if you're doing it right, it's a very sort of, especially if you're new at it, it's an uncomfortable thing to be that genuine with yourself and with other people. And you have to really, sort of build up that muscle over many, many years. We sort of go through these processes where we're trying to keep things below the surface, but that's the good stuff. If you can turn to face those fears and can embrace that uncertainty, that's what it takes to break through.
Yeah.
Break through.
well, and let's just agree that self-awareness and leading yourself should include at least developing an understanding of one's own natural drives, needs, and behaviors.
100%.
So in the world of talent optimization, just understanding how you're wired, accepting those strengths, working to, we don't say change, but maybe adapt in situations where we could use things like emotional intelligence. So we have data that helps us do that. We always talk about predictive index on our podcast. It happens to be a tool that we feel gets the job done when it comes to providing this valid, really powerful data. So let's say people, they get a sense of themselves like you've done, they do the work. How does that translate then into leading others more effectively?
Yeah, the very last step that I have for leading yourself, I should say, is transcendence. You work so hard on yourself for so long to go through those steps of awareness and acceptance. I also include confidence and I include authenticity. But then you hit transcendence, which is that you have to realize as a leader, it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about the mission. It's about the other people. And that's where you start to realize there's this a totally self-oriented pursuit is a recipe for disaster. It just does not, it's not how we're wired. It might be how we're conditioned, but it's not how we're wired, in my opinion. So that sets the table for saying, now we're ready to step up, like, as you said, and we're ready to lead others. The very first thing I start with there is empathy. And come to find that for various neurobiological reasons, and I would say cosmic reasons too, we are naturally wired for empathy. And when you think about what is empathy, it's the ability to project and to estimate what someone else might be feeling in a given situation. If you never had any empathy, you had no interest in what others might be feeling, it would be impossible to motivate and connect with them. It would be impossible to really lead them.
Yes.
So I feel like empathy is where it all has to begin, where we start to recognize that there's others are having an experience that might be different than ours.
Right.
How many times have you seen engagement studies come back and you say, how are the executives' engagement? Super high. How about the VPs? Oh, also really high. Managers. How about the individual contributors? Right off the table. Well, hold on. How about the fact that when I walk into a room as a leader, how many of us have thought, well, I'm feeling like I'm having a good day. Well, yeah, because you're a VP, for example, you're an executive, like you're having a good time at work, but are you willing to shift and say, I wonder what the work experience is like for these other people in the room? As soon as you leave your own cage of your own brain and you start to shift that perspective towards what others might be experiencing and that they may be having a different experience than you, that's an act of empathy.
It is. And Matt, that I'm so glad you emphasize that as you build out the chapter on leading others. I have to add that Brené Brown would say that empathy is not even just reading being able to read and try to understand what another person's experience or feeling or thoughts may be, but it's believing them. And I think about, so the example of the engagement survey, how often it is we sit with leaders who have engagement data in their hands and they start to minimize the feedback they're getting, and they downplay the experience or the thoughts or the responses of their direct reports.
Right.
And it's like, so there's somewhere in here some kind of a block to believing. And I think in the world we live in today, hey, we all have different ideas, different political views. What would it be like if we just appreciated and understood and believed in the other person's perspective, even if it's radically different than our own? All right, we'll be right back.
With employee disengagement at its highest level in 9 years, your company can't afford to miss the mark when it comes to optimizing your hiring, management, and team performance practices. At its lowest level, employee turnover costs you $11,000 per person. And those are dollars you can easily save with the right set of people analytics. Real Good Ventures is a talent optimization consultancy specializing in world-class analytics specific to your people and the critical role they play within your organization. Gain confidence in your hiring practices, keep the boss holes from driving your talent away, design your teams for flawless execution, and create a culture that offers meaning and fulfillment. Real Good Ventures has a family of validated diagnostic tools specific to the human aspect of business, because we know that all business issues are people issues. Visit us today at www.realgoodventures.com and bring meaning and fulfillment back into your workplace.
Okay, let's get back to the program.
I think there's an opportunity here also to share with you the thing that surprised me the most is over the course of me writing this book.
Yeah.
And there's something that showed up time and again that worked against an enlightened form of leadership, and that was fear. And so I think if you set in front of me, I'm an executive, I'm not particularly enlightened. You set in front of me data that says that my people are having a bad time. Why do I so quickly move to rationalize that and say, well, it's because, we've slipped on our hiring recently. We brought in some bad apples. Like, that is a response based on fear. And what I find is that fear destroys anything good in relationships and in organizations.
Yes.
Well, the reason is because if I accept that these numbers are terrible and I'm the chief executive, what does that say about me?
Right.
All of a sudden, I don't feel so safe. I report to a board. What if I open my heart in that way and I say there are people on my team who are suffering?
Yeah.
Right.
How can I feel that that's safe and psychologically for me to be able to accept that? And I think that's where we have to move, and that's where empathy can help us. Just the sheer recognition that, to your point, believing what I'm seeing, that others are having a tough go of things is the beginning of true leadership.
I agree. If you go back to lead yourself, something that probably can help all of us is awareness of the fundamental attribution error. So not only is fear at play, but we're actually naturally wired to look at someone else's challenges and give responsibility to that, to their character. So we would overemphasize their character when there was maybe an unsatisfying outcome. However, if it was us in the situation, we'd be likely to look at the situation or the circumstances. The fundamental attribution error only makes that more difficult and challenging, and fear is such a strong emotion.
It is.
Well, then it's a contagion that'll overtake an organization. And
all the time.
Yeah. And ultimately we get to be able to use this objective data and speak to the executive or the CEO or senior most leaders saying, this starts with you. Yeah, this is not somebody else's issue. This is something you have to address, because if it's pervasive, it will completely. Here's the thing. It can exist in an organization and it can exist in a highly profitable organization. But if that's all you're looking at, you have no way to really mitigate fear, disengagement, active disengagement, or the potential for people leaving or staying and not doing their work. It just is overwhelming.
And I think the other thing is that that might have worked in the past, but I think because we've acknowledged everything has changed.
Yeah.
And not only are our workers today increasingly remote in the sense of their work format, we're seeing Gen Z pour into the workplace, Highest levels of openness and inclusivity I've ever seen. Absolutely want participation, racked with anxiety, racked with stress.
Yes.
Low trust, and with good reason, by the way. And so it's like, wow, what the types of leadership that help produce results in the past that we've reinforced into our practices and conditioned ourselves to think, oh, this is great, this is exactly what I should be doing, is not suiting us for the future of where things are headed. When you need high levels of collaboration, when you need, to have that type of trust, these types of things, you're going to see higher levels of creativity and flexibility and agility and all the things we want in our organizations. You can't get there without these techniques. It's just not possible. But I'll continue to build this one out for you. When we start with empathy, we move on to altruism. Am I willing to expend energy and effort and even put myself at risk with no guarantee of return? That sounds like parenting to me. You know what? That sounds like leadership too. Because the reality is, am I willing to invest in somebody who's not a member of my team just because it's the right thing to do? Like, just because I have a potential to help them? Like, what if it doesn't work out? What if I invest in this person and they end up leaving? What if you don't invest in them and they end up staying? Right. You're bypassing your leadership opportunity when we don't accept some level of altruism. Moving forward, still, you move into things like trust. Trust is so critical and so easy to lose, right? What about fairness? We talk about fairness a lot today, but do we really go far enough? I talk about neurodiversity in the book, an area that was new for me to think about. How do you incorporate that into your leadership when you have neurodiverse individuals coming onto your teams? These types of things. Personality, very much talent optimization. People understand that not all introverts and extroverts are going to show up on a Zoom call the same way. Right. And if you just treat everybody like you would want to do it because you happen to be of a certain type, you're not creating a fair environment.
Right.
And I quote work from Susan Cain as well, talking about the power of introverts, and these sorts of things are dimensions of fairness that we don't think about as often, but they're really important, for people. And then finally, the last bit in that particular area is all around connectedness and the fact that we're more connected than we see. What percentage of communication, we've all seen the studies about verbal versus nonverbal communication. Below the level of our own consciousness, we're communicating with one another all the time through our body language, through our mannerisms, the pace of our speech. Well, if that connection exists, what are we missing? What other types of connections do we have that we're not even thinking about? So this is where I feel like there's a chance to break down and say, just because things look a certain way doesn't mean that they're exclusively that way.
Right.
And if I can get leaders to the point where they acknowledge, there is more to this. I never really thought about that way. Then it opens up this fertile opportunity to say, maybe we can evolve. Maybe we can evolve.
Right.
That idea of evolving, and I'm just referencing in this discussion about how it's almost like a decision. There's a tipping point. If you get some negative feedback or something doesn't go as planned with a team, fear can overtake you, and all of it, and your brain just starts reacting from a fear-based perspective.
Right. Yes.
I just facilitated a take action on engagement workshop. We did an employee experience survey with a client, and I mean, we spend time with managers, because that's the unique thing about it, is that it actually creates action steps for managers based on objective data on engagement. But there was this one manager, and I mean, she was visibly shaken by the really poor results that were provided on her report. And I took her aside and I said, listen, this may feel like it really hurts, but I want you to consider that these people took the time to share this information. And they have handed it to you. And this is a really beautiful opportunity for you to receive it in a different way. Not the typical way of getting angry or resentful, but absorb that and realize that this is a time for you to change the way you approach your people and embrace the authenticity and the data that they provided you, and use it to the greatest benefit of the team. And that's that point right there, Matt, where you have to decide to be a different leader, or you choose to break free from a lot of these conventions and say, there's a much better way to do this.
You have the opportunity, and you provided a beautiful coaching opportunity there to say there's a different way of looking at what just landed in your lap.
Right.
And you mentioned she was visibly shaken. She could feel it in her body. There's this connection between what gets into our mind and how it actually manifests in our body. And coaches get us to slow down and to feel that, and because there's this real connection between how we're feeling and what we're thinking. And so one of the things that I like with this framework, I like to say, is that aspiration should work from the outside in. We should be concerned about the mission and others and things outside of ourselves first and work our way back. But accountability happens from the inside out. I have to start with myself.
Yeah.
So now in that case where we have these engagement results that are poor that show up, my aspiration should be, I want to help these people.
Yeah.
They're on my team. There's nobody I care about in the building more than making sure these people are having a good time, and that's not happening for them. Right. So if I could just neutralize the fear of, oh, what's this going to say about me? And are the people looking at me? And who else saw this report? Did my boss see this report too? And they think I'm a terrible manager? That's all ego. And that's all fear. And the opposite of fear is not courage. The opposite of fear is love. And when you feel love for the people who've been hurt and who are making themselves heard in this engagement report, if you could just magically step into their well-being and say, like, how are we going to fix this? All of a sudden, you will take your leadership to the next level. Again, simple but not easy. And it's very emotional to go through that. But this is where a combination of mindfulness and compassion and wisdom can help leaders break through. And that's why I'm so adamant that we have to slough off outdated beliefs and approaches. And that's what, when I use the term enlightened leadership, it's being willing to go past the way that we used to do things in the past, because everything has changed. We ourselves must change too.
Yeah,
that's right.
One other thing, Matt, really quick. I mean, of course, everybody knows you as the godfather of talent optimization. And people that listen to the Bosshole Chronicles have heard us talk a lot about talent optimization, but you had shared that, you saw these dots connecting. I mean, you saw the threads that were running through your work and how these all came together. Just give us a little bit of a glimpse of how that moment when you realized how it sort of all coalesced together and said, this is the message.
Yeah, I think that it was a combination of things. When I think about talent optimization essentials as an example, we talk about how all people practices take place within the business context. Well, the reality is that's leadership. What more higher order people practice is there? And so I think that leadership absolutely takes place within the business context. And fortunately, in the book, for example, I cite all the ways that it really drives business outcomes: productivity, presenteeism, creativity, innovation, all these kinds of things. But another thing that we say in talent optimization essentials is that we need to have an attitude of having leaders at every level. I think we talked about a little bit before that word leader is so supercharged. I'm an individual contributor. I'm not a leader. No, you absolutely are a leader. You can lead your projects. You can comport yourself. You can influence your peers and even your boss, your team members, those around you. You're absolutely a leader.
Yeah.
And coming out of the service, I had an unfair advantage because I never would have let somebody tell me you're not a leader because you don't have any direct reports. My very first job, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm bigger leader than you. Maybe that was a little small. But the point is that I think it was healthy to basically always see myself as a leader in every situation. That doesn't mean I'm always going to be dominant and in charge and making the decisions, of course, but I can still lead.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's
well,
an
leaders have influence. I mean, anyone who has influence over people or process is in fact a leader. It's just knowing where your influence comes from and being intentional about it. Would you agree?
100%. And I feel like, when you think about team sports or any sort of these collective, like a symphony, if you want to think about it, leading is just making sure that others around you are okay. You see somebody struggling with their sheet music and they're the second violin, your first violin, and you help them get sorted because you have more experience than they do. That's a leadership activity. You're not the conductor, you're not the whatever, but you still have an opportunity to lead at every moment of every day, really, when you get down to it. But this is where talent optimization fits nicely in here, because when you think about designing winning teams,
yes,
when we think about leading your team, for example, in the book, we talk about really important areas of vision. Like, what is it that you see? How are you going to articulate that story so everybody can see themselves in that future positive reality? If you don't work on your storytelling as a leader, you're not going to be as effective, right? We talk about identity. How do I identify with the team members so I'm willing to work on our work product, but also on the team dynamic, right? What about safety? Amy Edmondson, classic, amazing guest of yours. Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety is just amazing. and it fits in my framework right in that team dynamic. So when design is about designing winning teams and talent optimization, you're not going to be able to do that without the types of things that I'm talking about in this framework over here from a more enlightened perspective. So they absolutely go hand in glove.
I'm excited. I'm excited for all the readers out there and the people that are going to see it. So the book is out. People can order it. And then you're going to be on the speaking circuit. I got to imagine you're going to be out there talking about the book and speaking to a lot of people.
Yeah, I love talking about the concepts because I feel like, the book is great in the sense that it's standalone. You pick it up, it's got a self-assessment in it. So you figure out where within the framework of leading yourself and leading others is your biggest focus opportunity, what you're most excited about working on in terms of developing yourself. It's got exercises in it too that you can complete. So you don't have to wander about and trying to figure out, am I making progress? What should I be doing? You don't have to do the endless Google searches, Everybody's super pressed for time. So I wanted to give them a book that was equally inspiring and had a framework to it, but also had practical exercises. But the chance to do, to give a talk or to give workshops or to connect with talent optimization clients and start to bring in some of these concepts is so rewarding because it's just such an important time for us right now. I really feel like the world of work is fundamentally strained, and it's because our people have moved faster than our leadership. The nature of the changes in terms of the way that we work, the nature of the changes taking place within our workers, where they're suffering from what I call the 3 killer Bs, being, belonging, something bigger than myself. These are things that often go unspoken, but they're what our people want.
Yeah.
And the leader who's in a natural position to help connect those dots, we're not training them how to do it. We're not encouraging them to adopt these enlightened approaches. And I feel like there's an opportunity to do that together in that kind of a workshop or a talk format that just kind of takes the book and just gives you another access point to it. So yeah.
And we all know
So
that
powerful.
if you're not aware of the killer bees, then you become a super bee, which is a boss hole. So I'm throwing another bee in there. Matt, we're so excited for you. Congratulations. And by the way, all of Matt's contact information, links, obviously a link to the book will be in the show notes. And we've had the pleasure of seeing you speak at some pretty significant conferences. And so if anybody is out there looking for a really dynamic speaker, contact Dr. Matt Poepsel and get him on the agenda, because you won't be sorry. And he's got a great message.
Thank you, John and Sarah. I really appreciate it. It's such an important time for us, and I love the great information you're putting out to your audience. It's just so necessary right now.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your work in this space, Dr. P. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll see you all next time on the Bosshole Chronicles.
We'd like to thank our guest today on the Bosshole Chronicles. And if you have a Bosshole Chronicles story of your own, please email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Once again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you again soon.